This is the Bundu Mask. The Bundu Mask is associated with the Sonde Society, and the people group is the Mende. And so I try to help you guys come up with some like mnemonic devices to remember things. And so the Bundu mask is the only mask we look at that was actually worn and performed by women. Okay, worn or performed by women. So if you think of Sonde sounding like Sandy and Mende sounding like Mendy, then maybe that will help you remember, which are traditionally girls' names, would help you remember that this work is performed by women, worn by women. It is a mask that kind of sits right on top of the head, okay? Sits on top of the head. And so it's like what we call a helmet mask. It's not just over the front of the face, but it's actually on top of the head. And then the grass, the hair hangs down from that mask. Oh, sorry about that. All right. Wood, cloth, fiber, you'll see this kind of the kind of point at the top, right? So all of that is a dark ebony wood that has been polished really well for a pretty high sheen. And keep in mind, typically the men are going to be the carvers. So even though this is a woman's object, it would be constructed made by a man. And all these different facets of it have different reasons that they're there. So the hairstyle, this is the fat rolls, those are all important qualities. And so they're going to talk about that in the video. Wanted to make sure you guys had the information for it first. All right, so we are going to watch Smart History.
We're in the Brooklyn Museum and we're looking at one of several helmet masks for the Sandy Society.
This is a pan-West African phenomenon where several different ethnic groups participated in this masquerade tradition.
The mask we're looking at would have been worn not in front of the face, but on top of the head. But the person who wore it...
So I just want to point out, this is not our exact Bundu mask that we're looking at, but these are all very similar ones. And so all of the things they talk about are going to apply to our mask as well.
Would have been obscured by raffia that would have hung down over the face.
But what makes it really unique is it's the only masquerade tradition that we know of where women wore the mask.
Now, a man would have made this mask, would have actually carved it, but the entire ritual was performed by and for women.
It was made to help young girls go through initiation. Young girls among many different ethnic groups.
So in terms of function, this is going to be an object that's made to be performed as part of a coming of age ceremony. So they're going to talk about the tradition of the initiation that women would girls would go through. And then this performance in the Bundu mask is kind of the culmination of that initiation, right? So it happens at the end.
Groups, including the Mende, whose group made this particular mask, would have been taken from their everyday lives and their chores to a secluded area in the forest where they would be instructed on how to...
So I just want to point out real quick in this context picture, all of these girls that are sitting here across the front, those are the girls who are being initiated into the Sonde Society, right? And so this is a coming of age ceremony. And they're covered, they look a little different. They're covered in a white kind of paste material, which they're going to talk about. And I want you guys to see their different sizes, different ages. So this ceremony happens after menstruation starts for the girls. So after they get their period, they're considered women, and they are put into this this initiation. So that's why there are different ages and sizes.
To become good wives and good mothers by the members of the Sonde Society. And again, this was a secret society that all girls were initiated into.
There's real symbolism in being taken from the village into this more dangerous place.
This was a liminal time for girls, and in fact, their bodies would be anointed with white clay to make them dry and pasty and unattractive, to suggest that they were not girls but hadn't yet become women. And so it was outside of the realm of the village where this could take place.
If we look at the mask, it's got a beautiful deep black sheen. The surface is smooth and glistening and is in such contrast to that chalky white.
This black shininess is really the ideal. So what the artist has done, the carver, is create an image that suggests an inner quality or the inner morality that young girls should strive for. The mask becomes an ideal for the young girls to mimic in their adult lives.
Well, we see eyes that are largely closed and seem quite demure. We see a very small mouth and very petite ears.
And these downcast eyes suggest that she should be reserved. The small mouth suggests she should keep her mouth closed and not gossip, gossip being the most dangerous thing in a small society in many cases. And then small ears so as not to listen to that gossip.
But probably most evident is this wildly elaborate hairstyle.
And the hairstyle is where the artist has room for play. So we have that seriousness of the...
So even though our Bundu mask is different, I want you guys to notice that the hairstyle, obviously, and the hairstyle, again, as they mentioned, this is where the artist can experiment and, play around and come up with their own artistic voice. But the hairstyle is going to be in contrast to the seriousness of the face. And so the hairstyle is a little bit more elaborate, a little bit more playful, if you will, versus the face is going to be more of this ideal, solemn figure type.
The face, this high glossy forehead, but then we have this elaborate coiffure. We don't know the symbolic meaning of all of these things. Many of this is learned as knowledge of that secret society.
And this is not just historical, this is a continuing tradition.
Because of the civil war in Sierra Leone and surrounding countries, all sorts of conflicts, we don't know to what extent this tradition continues today.
One of the other most evident features are the rolls of fat under the chin.
They are to suggest that she is full figured, that she has enough body fat to be able to bear children. And she is expected after initiation to marry and have children. So this suggests an ideal. Again, also in seclusion during initiation is the only time a young girl is given really rich foods to eat and can enjoy time off. So it's intended to fatten her up a little bit too. The Soe mask is thought to be a spirit. She comes from the bottoms of rivers and lakes.
So Soe, again, is referring to this spiritual essence that lives at the bottom of rivers and lakes. So think about it as that kind of thick silt or mud at the bottom of a lake or a creek or a river. And so the darkness kind of comes from that Soe. And so this is kind of how it ties into the spiritual realm.
Below her eyes, there are 4 lines on either side.
These are scarification marks, and they're part of the ideal aesthetic for a young Mende woman. While the girls are in seclusion in that liminal space, not yet women, but no longer girls, they're referred to as chrysalis. That is, not quite the butterfly, but no longer the caterpillar. And that shape is also echoed in the shape of her neck. So we have a multiplicity of meanings, which are partly to do with the way scholars have studied them, but also to do with the fact that girls are exposed to different knowledge at different times in their life when the Sunday members feel that it's appropriate. While this mask is intended to instruct young girls about proper womanhood, it actually never speaks. It never says a word. So this mask, silent, is able to teach young girls. And the way in which that is done is through dance. So the mask teaches the girls particular dance movements and stories through those dances, telling girls not only practical information on how to cook and raise kids, but also spiritual knowledge and information about their belief system.
So the mask.
So part of the function, of course, is to be worn in this ceremony at the end of the initiation, but it also is, as the girl is wearing this helmet mask, it's actually imparting knowledge to her. And so it's giving her the spiritual and the societal knowledge she needs to become a full-fledged functioning woman of that society. And I also want you guys to notice, again, remember, I've said it so many times, I'll keep saying it as long as we're looking at masks and crowns. They're part of a bigger outfit. They're part of other things. And so you see all this kind of raffia hanging off of her. And as she dances, it's going to be moving, right? And so she's activating the object by performing it.
Mask is this container of these very rich traditions. When we see it without its raffia, when we see it not worn, not part of this process of initiation, we're seeing it really as an aestheticized object in the Western tradition. Very different from the way this would be understood in its original context.
And young women think of this as a spirit when it's danced with its raffia.
And these masks would be used over and over again, but when they were not in the ritual itself, they would not have that spiritual presence.
It would have been housed in an elder woman's home who is an official from the Sunday Society, and it was quite fine for young initiates to see it. They wouldn't regard it as a spirit, they would regard it merely as a piece of wood, because again, it was not performing with its raffia costume and its attendants and musicians.
So that's interesting to note, because just like some of the other work we've looked at, when it is not being used, when this object is not being performed, it's simply a piece of wood, right? But as soon as it is activated, and it can be activated more than one time, these helmet masks were used by different women going through the initiation at different points in time throughout the community, right? It's going to be activated again and again and again. So religious objects being activated is really not a new idea. I'm thinking of like an icon, perhaps, in the Catholic Church that might be viewed as being activated through prayer, through veneration. So that's not a totally new idea for us. Let's see what else. So one of the things we've talked about a lot with rituals and ceremonies is that they connect societies. They bring people groups together. And when you lose those things, right, if you stop doing those things, then there's going to be a more maybe individualistic approach to society, less of this communal living. Well, with the Sunday Society, there has been some concern about the ethical, physical treatment that is done to the girls during this time. And so one of the practices of the original Sunday Society was FGM, which is female genital mutilation. And so I'm telling you that because I want you to understand that there are parts of this ritual that are physically altering the girls. That is something that certain humanitarian groups have tried to weed out of these ceremonies. So still encouraging the people of Sierra Leone to continue with these traditions that unify and build up and make a community for these women, but removing dangerous physical practices from that part of the initiation. So those are just some things to think about. Now, I do want to point out, because I love what they talk about there with the chrysalis. And so I want to point out this idea that their skin is very, very dark, and then they cover it with that white chalky clay, kaolin, which gives it that what they say is ugly, right? This kind of chalky, dried out appearance, and then they put the dark on top of that. And so it's signifying, the dark being the helmet mask and the raffia, it's signifying the transition as they perform, right? So they have black skin with white on top with black on top. And so it's showing that they're at that in-between step. As soon as the initiation is over and they wash off that clay, then they are fully woman and fully take on that new role in society. And there's that image.